it to the wrong person.
The meeting will come to order. May I have a roll call, please?
Iannarino?
Here.
Border?
Here.
Kane? Here. Khan?
Here.
Smoka?
Here.
Shupai?
Here.
Wong?
Here.
The mission of School District 15 is to produce world-class learners by building a connected learning community. Dr. Thompson?
This evening, we're going to be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by some students from Lake Louise School, and I'd like to have Mrs. Sayoni, and I can't remember your new name.
Mrs. Pagini.
Mrs. Pagini, thank you, Mrs. Pagini. Come up and introduce their students.
Thank you, cabinet members of the board, Dr. Thompson, President of the board, Mrs. Shupai. Thank you so much, and members of the community. Thank you so much for being here and letting us share our student groups that are here today. I have members of my student council, as well as the respectables that are here to lead you in the pledge today. Student councils, can you just raise your hands so we can see who you are? Very good. Respectables, can you raise your hands so? Very good. So our student councils, they're both leadership groups in our school. Student council has representatives from 3rd all the way to 6th grade. They make very important decisions per grade level. And our respectables are also members of our Respect team, which is our group that helps with our social emotional learning in our school. So I have 4 students actually that are prepared to say something. So let's have student council members come up first and they're going to tell you why it's important to be members of student council. Go ahead and say your name, your grade, and go ahead and tell us why it's important to be members of student council.
Hi, I'm Evan, and I'm in 6th grade, and it is important to be a member of student council because we help create fun in school with the school store and through PBAS celebrations.
Hi, I'm Anya. I'm part of the student council, and I think it's important to be part of the student council because we can make a better learning experience as well as have fun for all of our students so that all of our students could leave Lake Louise with positive attitudes for the school.
Hello, my name is Evelyn and I'm in 6th grade. I think it is important to be a member of student council so we can have the experience of helping others and nourish our school. We participate in food drives and we're leaders of our school.
Hola, mi nombre es Evelyn y yo estoy en 6º grado. Creo que es importante ser miembro del Consejo Estudiantil para que podamos tener la experiencia de ayudar a todos y hacer que nuestra escuela crezca. Podemos participar en campañas de recolectación de comida y somos líderes de nuestra escuela.
I think it is important to be part of the respectable team because we influence the youngest and to grow to be good role models for all students.
Very good. So, thank you. Obviously, leadership is very important in our school. It's also a way to connect students to school and develop appropriate student agency in students. So, we're very proud that you're all leaders in our school building. So, I think you're going to lead us in the pledge now.
Yes. Are they going to lead us in the pledge? Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, that'd be great. All right.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson, President Shupai, for hosting our group and allowing us to tell a little bit about our leadership groups at Lake Louise. We appreciate it very much.
We appreciate you all being here, and thanks for everything that you guys do at school. It takes something to stand up and be in front of everybody and be a leader in school, and in life as you move forward, it's something very special. So thank you all.
Thanks.
And for coming tonight and being leaders. The Board of Education gives you this light-up pen. It's kind of neat. It lights up. And, so come on over and get a pen, and thank you for coming tonight.
Or be a leader. Or would you just do it?
At least ask.
Are those for us?
Who gets those?
Yeah, I'd like to start the meeting by acknowledging something tragic that happened in District 15 last week. Last week, our world lost a very beautiful person. Carol Berry, kindergarten teacher at Stuart R. Paddock School, with her warm smile and her hand always outstretched, waiting for somebody to grab it and hold on to it, was loved by so many in the community. Mrs. Berry was the first contact that both students and teachers and parents had when they first came into the Stuart R. Paddock community. For many years, I had the benefit of speaking to parents at the kindergarten orientation about one of our PTA programs. Parents would come into the Paddock LRC with their kindergartner and sit and get acquainted with Paddock a little bit together. And then Mrs. Berry would be there. She welcomed not only the parents, but she also welcomed the students and the incoming kindergartners, and then would have them line up to go and see their kindergarten classroom, while the parents stayed back in the LRC. And you can all picture the faces there. A little concern, some happiness, some fear, some excitement, some worry. And not only on the faces of the children, but also the parents. We've all been there. But the best part of that experience for me was at the end of the meeting, after the parents were oriented to kindergarten at Stuart R. Paddock, and the children finished doing their craft in Mrs. Berry's classroom and got to know the teaching staff a little bit and their surroundings. Mrs. Berry would lead all the children back in a line, and those kids would come back into the LRC where the parents were still concerned, but instead of faces filled with concern, you'd have faces that were lit up with joy and giggles and happiness and excitement to begin the journey of being a member of the Stuart R. Paddock community. And Mrs. Berry always began this journey at the front of the line at the beginning of the year for every student coming into Stuart R. Paddock, and she was somebody that was appreciated by parents and students alike as time went on. She will be missed tremendously by the Stuart R. Paddock community and by District 15 as a whole, as well as I know the sheer quantity of friends and family and support that she had. So that's really all I have to say. Great, great lady, and such a great person and good for our community. All right, Dr.
Thank you. Thank you for that. That's very touching. She will be missed. In my section tonight, we're going to be talking about a few things. The first one is a student enrollment update with Dr. Barbini. Would you please come up and give us that?
Good evening, Dr. Thompson, President Shupai, and members of the Board of Education. Tonight, I am here before you to give you an update regarding student enrollment in District 15. All public school districts in the state of Illinois are required to provide ISB, the Illinois State Board of Education, with enrollment information on an annual basis. That requirement is otherwise known as the Fall Housing Report. That information is due in terms of an upload from our data systems to the state at the end of September, so September 30th or October 1st each year. The information that I will be presenting this evening contains fall housing information from September 30th, October 1st, over the course of the last 10 school years, as well as some information taken from September 4th of this school year for the 18-19 school year. All information associated with the last 10 school years is publicly accessible and available at the Illinois State Board of Education website, which is linked to the presentation before you. The data, enrollment data for the 18-19 school year, that is all preliminary. Once again, it was pulled on September 4th. It will be looked at again and presented to you with a different date in October as a part of the student assignment presentation, where we go over staffing to meet the needs of the students that are enrolled in the district. So there'll be different information at that point in time, because any time you look at enrollment in any district, whether it's a large district or a small district, it's a snapshot in time, because kids move into the district, they move out of the district, etc. So I just want to reiterate that tonight's information is not going to be what's uploaded to the state, because that information is required in terms of an upload at the end of this month or early October. So we're just basically looking at where we were in a snapshot in time as of September 4th. So where were we as of September 4th, 2018? In District 15, at that point in time, in terms of pre-K or preschool through 8th grade, we had 12,316 kids, and that's the breakdown of students in our excellent district. 549 preschool students, ages 3, 4, and 5, 11,767 K-8 students, and that brings us to a grand total of 12,316 total students in the district as of September 4th. So this information was in the memo that was shared with you and the community. Everything in the table that's white, that is fall housing information. Once again, that was reported in and around September 30th to October 1st from the last 10 years, beginning in the 2008-2009 school year, moving forward through the 2017-18 school year. The gray scale is the information as of September 4th this year, which is likely to change. This slide was developed to give you a graphical representation associated with enrollment. And as you can see, based on this data, there is a gradual decline in enrollment over the course of the last 5 school years. And we'll get into exactly, what that quantifiable number would be, near the end of the presentation. One of the other things that we did this year is we wanted to give you an idea of what the breakdown of enrollment was and some of the change in enrollment by junior high and their elementary feeder school structure. So beginning with the Carl Sandburg Junior High feeder school structure, pretty much Central Road, Kimball Hill, Thomas Jefferson, we're looking at a reduction in enrollment from the 2014-15 school year to the 2018-19 school year. The only outlier school that is showing an increase is Willow Bend Elementary School, which is showing a 13.1% increase in enrollment from the 14-15 school year to 18-19, with an enrollment change of approximately 74 additional students to that school. So 3 of the schools are showing a decrease in enrollment. All right, one of the schools is showing a pretty significant increase. Then when we move to Plum Grove Junior High and then the excellent elementary schools that feed into there, and all of our schools are excellent, we have Stuart R. Paddock is showing a reduction of enrollment of 4.1%, so they've lost about 30 kids over the course of the last 4 years. The other schools have seen an increase. Frank C. Whiteley, a nominal increase at about 2.2%, but the schools worth mentioning that are seeing an increase, a pretty significant increase, are Hunting Ridge Elementary School at close to 18% increase in enrollment, or 109 students, and then Pleasant Hill Elementary School, which is at a 14.5% increase, or approximately 82 students new or added to that school in terms of enrollment. So although our global trend is showing a reduction in the district, and several of our elementary schools are showing reduced enrollment over the course of the 5 years, there are some schools, Willow Bend, Pleasant Hill, Hunting Ridge, etc., that are also showing some increases that we need to be aware of. When we move to Sunling Junior High and its elementary feeder schools, we have no change at Marion Jordan, and I think that that's just an outlier in and of itself, but we do see a pretty steep reduction in enrollment at Lincoln Elementary School at 12.4%, or 106 students, followed up by a reduction at GMS, Graham Sanborn, of approximately 4.5. Transitioning to Winston Campus Junior High, pretty much across the board we're seeing reductions, anywhere between 10 to 15% at the elementary schools that feed into Winston Campus Junior High, with the highest being Lake Louise at 15.2% reduction, or 114 student reduction over the course of the last 5 years. So, what does this mean? And there's a variety of different ways to look at this information. But in terms of looking on average, it's approximately a decline when we look at preschool through 8th grade, district-wide, of 3.3%, or 413 students, once again, preschool through 8th grade, or a decline of 395 students, or 3.2%, for kids in grades K-8. So we're looking at approximately a 3%, in aggregate, across the entire district, reduction in enrollment. And as I stated before, although many schools are experiencing reduction in enrollment, we do have some schools that are seeing an increase in enrollment, and along with that comes, challenges associated with space. And we'll talk more about some of those space challenges during the student assignment presentation on October 3rd, where we talk about the staff that we've allocated, the resources that we've allocated to meet the needs of our 12,000 excellent students in District 15. And with that being said, what questions do you have?
Dr. Barbini, do you have, and you can do this next month, statistics on sort of school-eligible population, either through what we do for busing, and sort of, is it that there are fewer students in these areas, or more opting for private school versus the District 15 schools in one of the feeder groups versus the other?
I think that would be an outstanding opportunity to look at next month, Board Member Border. I don't have that this evening.
Do we have the ability to get to it?
In terms of families that choose the option of private schools, some of those families are not known to us because they make that decision in kindergarten and even in preschool. So that's difficult to quantify. There are other methods of looking at that, but even at that, there's no exact science in terms of looking at enrollment, because you can look at live birth trend data, but when you have mobility, that also impacts that. So I think what we can do, is we can look at some of the mobility data, and we really have the advantage of working with some very bright people, and some of those folks are going to be presenting this evening in terms of Dr. Tom Edgar and Dr. Laura Swanlin. They are our statisticians, and what we can do is, we'll huddle up, we'll have a little bit of a powwow, between now and October 3rd, and then we'll look at getting some additional information, for you. But it's variable, things are subject to change. It does demonstrate a trend over time, but we'll look more into some of the things that we can present with a degree of confidence at the next board meeting.
Okay, thanks.
Just to clarify too, the enrollment numbers, they are truly based on where students are attending school, not where they would attend school based on their home address, right? So like if somebody was in a gifted program that required them to go to a school other than their neighborhood school, they would be counted at the school they attend, right? Not the school. These numbers put them in the school where they are attending, correct? Not where they live.
That is correct. So we took the information in our student information system based on school of attendance. So if a student's in Board Member Kane, a program by choice or by need, they're showing up in the school where that program exists.
Okay.
So Pleasant Hill Elementary School, for example, has 2 sections of the district's gifted and talented program. Now, the vast majority, if not all of the students that are in that program, are Pleasant Hill students, but that's a program that's there. There are other programs, special ed and general ed, that exist throughout the district that, it would show an increase, because that's where the attending school is.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brady. The next item in my section is a report from our Equity Committee. And I'd like to ask Dr. Edgar and Dr. Swanlin to come up with Dr. Wolfel and Colleen Mullins.
Dave, we had a conversation yesterday with regard to enrollment stats specific to kindergarten. Like to try to get a feel for the number of kindergartners that go elsewhere because of kindergarten programming, or they were in a preschool program somewhere and they rolled right into a kindergarten program. And Colleen mentioned to me that there's access, we have access to numbers if we're providing services to those private schools, but if we're not, then we don't. But potentially can back into something based on that.
Yeah, we'll have numbers of kids that live in District 15 that attend private schools. We just don't know what school they will attend. We have to get the numbers from them to share the Title I funds as a requirement with our private schools. So they have to tell us, this is the number of fourth graders that would attend District 15 schools that are in our school. We just don't know what school they would attend because they don't send us the addresses.
Right.
So we'll have...
provide transportation or other services, we would.
We could probably...
We could back into it from transportation numbers to the extent that we use that.
But we don't transport all those kids.
Right.
So,
but you could at least get a directional.
Yeah,
Okay.
ballpark. Good evening.
Well, good evening, Dr. Thompson, President Shupai, members of the board. We're really happy to be here tonight to present to you the District Achievement Gap presentation. As a result of the board retreat that was held soon after everyone was elected, as well as the strategic planning meeting last March, there was a need to really take a close look at where the achievement gap in District 15 was coming from. So there was a research study that was completed to find the source of that gap, and we also have some recommendations to share with you with regard to how we are going to address it.
So first I'm going to go over how we defined the achievement gap. So this was looking at the students who were at the lowest quartile or 25th percentile in second grade on the MAP test, so the test that we give every year to our students, nationally in English, and we looked at that same group over time. So it was a cohort model in which it was when they entered in second grade and then exited at eighth grade, examining the factors that may contribute to having a student stay within that bottom quartile or potentially move out of that quartile over time. And we did this kind of non-traditional approach so that we are able to look at all of our students, not so much by certain characteristics such as race or ethnicity or income status. While those factors were a part of the analysis, this cohort model lets us look at our impact. So it's able to see if you are in second grade and you had indicators that are starting off kind of within that gap between our standards of proficiency, how did you perform over time? Who were the students that stayed in that area over time? What were their kind of characteristics or trends that we found? Who were the students that were able to make that growth? So this is aligned with our standards in terms of looking more at student growth and really seeing our impact for students who are able to stay with District 15 for their entire career. So these were also students that were with us from that second to eighth grade.
Okay, so when we looked at it, we looked at, and we expected to find what traditionally the achievement gap is attributed to. So language, ethnicity, school attendance, but surprisingly what we found was that these factors, the native language, the school that children attend, and their race and ethnicity were not the factors that, that affected the achievement gap.
There we go. Sorry.
Let's move. All right, I'm sorry. We moved around. I'm sorry. So even though there were some surprising things that we found right, that are also new based upon the way we approach this. There were some things that we were able to separate, that we identified that were not surprising and that are well vested in the literature. So first, we found that poverty has a big contribution to the achievement gap. If you come from a background where poverty is part of it, you are much more likely to be a student who starts in that lower performing area and remains there. So we were able to identify that, and that's something that's been identified repeatedly across the nation. The other thing that we found is a risk factor is for those students who come to our district who are not yet English proficient, but who don't progress to a level of English proficiency during their career in District 15. Most students who come who are not yet English proficient graduate from that and attain English language proficiency. But those who don't are at a special risk. And we found that that was actually one of the biggest factors that was aligned with you maintaining yourself in that lower group. So these two things were not surprises, but they were important findings because they help focus our attention on where we need to be especially careful in monitoring and where we need to make sure our services are especially designed to have their impact.
And these two factors actually are one of the reasons that we also face one of our greatest challenges, which what we know with academic achievement is that oral language proficiency plays a huge role in that. And what we mean by oral language proficiency is not that it's about talk, it is about understanding more complex language structure. So language means everything from the smallest sound to discourse and everything in between. What we know is that language complexity, as it builds, we all know it when we see students, when little ones, as they continue to build language, but it continues past 6th grade to grow. When we do not have a strong academic language control, we start to see wider gaps because it is the foundation for everything: speaking, listening, reading, writing, and thinking. Jerome Bruner says, proficiency in oral language is a vital tool for thought, that without a fluent and structured oral language, children find it very hard to think abstractly and symbolically. What we know is that it is not about English language proficiency. It is about language proficiency. No matter what is your first language, if you have strong oral language proficiency, we seem to not be in that category where you're stuck. So when we look at our long-term English learners, it is many times not having a strong oral language proficiency in their first language that doesn't transfer over. When we think about our students, when they are building their proficiency, language only develops through use. So we need to make sure that we are looking at these students very closely and helping them to have more control over the language that they're going to be using to continue their school growth and success.
Something that we have been working on, and this board as well as the previous board have been instrumental in providing to the students of District 15, is what is referred to as a guaranteed and viable curriculum. A guaranteed and viable curriculum refers to, we know what it is that needs to be taught, and we're providing the ample time within the school day for it to be taught. That's the most important thing that we can be providing, and I am happy to say that as a result of concerted efforts with regard to instructional strategies, as well as having curriculum materials that are going to foster oral language proficiency, that we're in a much better place than we were 3 or 4 years ago. But that need continues. We need to be able to provide our students with more opportunities to use their language and to use the materials that have been put into place and put into teachers' hands to make sure that the teachers are able to provide them with those experiences.
So once we realized where our data led us to look more carefully at, we started looking at how we are aligning our existing and new initiatives towards those findings. And this represents several of the things that we have been doing to try and increase access and opportunity for our students to have rigorous and engaging experiences in school. One of the first things that we've done is we've looked at our offering of accelerated or advanced curriculum curriculum. One of the things to remember is even though we have targeted those students who are in our lower performing range, we're not losing sight of the larger district's needs, right? We're making sure that we have offerings that meet all the students and can provide them with ways of accelerating their growth regardless of where they fall in that achievement curriculum. One of the first things we did is we looked at our accelerated math offering. We often call it out of level. And this is where we identify students who might be eligible to attend math instruction in the grade level above where they would normally go based upon their age. In the past, we've taken a very conservative approach to this because there's risk. We want to make sure that any student that advanced forward didn't experience failure or was so unlikely to experience failure that they wouldn't have to come back to the original grade that they departed from, right? So we were really looking to make sure that a student had a successful experience and wouldn't be exposed to maybe a difficult experience of having difficulty or having to return. But in doing that, we realized that we overlooked a series of students who would likely be successful, yet they didn't meet all the markers that we had set as the eligibility criteria. So we have looked at revising that in two ways. First, we've become more liberal in the way we select students. And secondly, we've developed alternative avenues for those students who would traditionally be overlooked, those that come from linguistically diverse or economically diverse backgrounds. So that's one of the first things we did to make sure that we were providing opportunities that might have been restricted to some students for incorrect reasons, or at least for reasons that we thought weren't appropriate to continue. Along with that, we've replaced what we've used as a grouping or tracking model. We have been engaged in a study a couple of years ago where we looked to see if students in different achievement bands benefited from being instructed in homogeneous groups. Does it make sense and is it impactful for those students with high achievement only with others with high achievement, those in the middle with the middle, and those with low in the low? Is that an impactful practice? And looking at our study, we did realize that there is a benefit for those who advance a full grade. There is benefit for that, and that's part of the reason that we've offered a wider offering of this accelerated math. But for those students who are high performing, low performing, or middle performing, there was no distinct advantage for being taught within the same group, within the same grade level. But there was a disadvantage if you started with low achievement. If you were a low achiever placed in a group with other low achieving students, you were at more risk not to grow like we would expect or want you to. And there's a variety of interpretations why, but we realized that this was a practice that was not benefiting our larger population, and it might put some at risk. So it's something we've worked really hard within our curriculum adoptions to replace. And by replace, we mean looking to select and purchase those curriculums that come designed to assist the teacher in reaching the full array of achievement in their class. They come with the diversity of materials and the guidance to really make sure that they can enrich those students who are ready for it, remediate those who require in-class remediation, and teach those students who are in between those two ends. The final thing that we've really worked to do as well is to kind of diversify and retool our assessment system. Over the last couple of years, we've looked at diversifying our basic internal assessment system, especially the BAP test, so that is more linguistically flexible and therefore informative to our teachers. Last year, we piloted, researched, and adopted the Spanish MAP test in math. It was such a successful study that actually NWA, the publisher, asked us for information and shared it across Illinois so that other districts can see how we approached selecting students who would most benefit from having this more flexible assessment. This year we plan to pilot and research the math test in reading. So we're looking to add yet another layer of flexibility within our internal assessment system, hoping to make it as sensitive as possible to our student needs and informative to our teachers.
Another avenue that we're able to increase access and opportunity is through our multi-tiered systems of support, and we have that for literacy, math, and social and emotional learning. And what that means is that while all kids are getting access to our core or our Tier 1, for students who might need more in these areas, they can get additional supports, either through like a Tier 2 or Tier 3 level of supports. That means that we're layering on levels of support for the students to meet their needs, and that we're not just like letting students fall through the cracks or struggle. This is a mechanism that all students are able to access whatever it is that they are going to need at their level through that multi-tiered system. And then we also have instructional coaches at our Title I schools. So these are teacher coaches that are supporting other teachers in the delivery of all of these supports to help differentiate, to help meet the needs of their diverse classroom and of all the students in the room. So that's another mechanism that teachers have that peer support and guidance to really help meet the needs of their students.
And in addition, we are implementing the culturally and linguistically responsive teaching and learning, or CLR, like we call it. It is a way of working with our students that validates them and affirms their home language and home culture, regardless of the culture. It is not cultural competency. It is and it's not about race and ethnicity. It is about the home culture. So we all have our home culture, and it's a way of accepting what that child brings to school, building on that, and helping that child learn school behaviors, and at the same time making that child feel valued for what they bring to school. So our preliminary data, and I just had the opportunity, I haven't even told this group here, of talking to the consultant that was in today as she was getting on the plane to go back. She was so excited. We're already seeing some really good results with our discipline data, as well as the culture and climate of our schools. So it was very, very positive. We also, thank you to the board and the board goal for dual language. We were able to implement 5 sections of dual language kindergarten this year, and it is going magically, is what I can say. If you have a chance to visit the classroom, it is really, truly amazing to see how fast the children are learning. Parents are conveying their children can't wait to come to school. So it just increases the opportunity. There's over 30 years of research on the effectiveness of dual language programs and how it increases access to opportunity.
Cheryl, I'm sorry to interrupt for a second, but you made a comment at one point about parent involvement, and I know, being from a school that is very diverse, we always struggled with parental involvement from our Hispanic population, our low-income population. They didn't come to school, they didn't become involved. But could you share what you told me yesterday?
About the PTA? Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, what we was really a real good point was at our first PTA meeting at one of our kindergarten sites, our dual language kindergarten sites, our dual language parents showed up at the PTA meeting. And so when they showed up, there were a lot of people that didn't know them, and they said, well, but this is our school now. This is where we come. So I think that outreaching, that saying this is where we belong, this is our school, we're going to participate, is just a big step in forming that whole community. Another point that some of our English-speaking parents had asked for Spanish classes. They want to learn Spanish along with their children. So through the community school, which I'm going to talk about next, we will be able to begin a Spanish class taught by 2 of our volunteers through the community school for the parents that want to come and learn some Spanish, basic Spanish, or just as far as they can go. They can learn as far as they can go. So those are exciting things. So thanks, Lisa, for bringing that up. The community school started about 4 years ago with a grant from the United Way and a partnership with the Palatine Opportunity Center, the POC. So we started at Winston, and what the community school is, it's actually a network of agencies and partners and community volunteers that allow more access to our community, to essential services. So it actually has grown beyond what we thought. We're going to open up now into the Rolling Meadows area. We've got parent workshops that we've already offered, it's 12 months a year. We offer 12 months a year. And the children, we have volunteers that can come into our schools for after-school help, but in addition, extend the school day from 4 to 6:30 p.m. to provide enrichments, more academic support, workshops for parents. So it's allowing a lot more access to our community.
We spoke about the need for oral language proficiency, and one of the things that is the best part about building oral language is that it really impacts all learners. While it really addresses the needs of our students that have more challenges or are having more challenges with growing as we would like to see them grow, it really benefits every single student in the class, and we're managing that and supporting our neediest learners as well as our wide span of different learners with our new curriculum materials, from math to science to social studies, which are really language rich. And if we know that language only develops through use, we know that the more language that is used, which is a vital tool for thought, the more development that we see for all learners, and it makes sure that the opportunity for our neediest learners, they're fully engaged. With our literacy materials, oral language is playing a huge role in that. It is part of our workshop model in which we are using Fountas of Pinnell Classroom. We're looking at for our monolingual English classes. We're looking at Okapi publishing materials for our bilingual classes and our dual language. It is where literacy and language are really together and built, but it goes across all curricular areas. We use the Word Generation program in grades 4 and 5 across the district, which builds academic vocab, academic language. It builds argumentative skills. It really gives that jump on listening, speaking, reading, writing, and thinking. We also are using the CLR, or the Culturally and Linguistic Responsive Instruction, to make sure we have equitable engagement. So if language only develops through use, is every single student in the class engaged fully in this thinking and learning process? We are helping teachers to better understand language proficiency and how to build it throughout your whole day, where it's not something that is taught, it is something that is embedded in every ounce of the instruction. And we are also making sure that like we said before, all of our instruction is student-centered and language-rich. And when we see that, every single student benefits, but it really helps target, within the regular context of the day, the needs of our most vulnerable learners.
All right, so in closing, we have some next steps. We need to continue to enrich our guaranteed and viable curriculum and make sure that it's in place for all of our students, not just the lower quartile, not just the highest quartile, but every single student in District 15, making sure that the instructional strategies that are in place in our classrooms are highly effective and the materials that we have been purchased are being implemented in the way that they were intended. One of the ways that we're doing this is through our instructional coaching model. In our Title I schools, there's an instructional coach who is pushing into classrooms and helping teachers learn how to do what we're asking them to do, which is increase the amount of language that children are participating in the classroom. When you go and observe in a classroom, you should really be looking at what the kids are doing, not what the adults in the class are doing. And what we want to see, contrary to what it was like when we were younger, we want to see the kids talking, because the way that you get to increase your oral language proficiency is by talking. So the instructional coaches are pushing in, teaching our teachers how to use turn and talks effectively, like turn to the person next to you and talk about what we just talked about, and then asking the kids to be able to participate. They've already practiced it once by talking to one of their peers, so they're a little bit more prepared to be able to be called on and to feel confident in their answer, which is really exciting. We're definitely going to be continuing to monitor the trends. I want to thank Mr. Smolka and Mr. Kahn, as well as Dr. Swanlin and Dr. Edgar for their work at the beginning of this with regard to the Equity Committee, because they were able to bring us the information, myself and Colleen and Cheryl, the information that we needed to know what to do about it. So we're very excited about the process that we have in front of us, and we're proud of the achievements that we've made so far with your support. And with that, we'll open it up to questions.
So I guess, not really a question to start, but a comment. Zubair and I had an opportunity to meet with you all on a number of occasions, and I just want to thank you guys for your work, because I know at first it was a little complicated for us to understand, and you broke it down for us, and I think that you put a lot of work, a lot of effort, and I think you were surprised as well as I was surprised that there was already a lot of this going on behind the scenes without us really having much information on it. So thank you for bringing it to us to provide that information. One question I did have is, could you talk a little bit from a DOI standpoint on how the curriculum is actually selected, what goes into that process, and why do we change curriculums at certain times, and is this going to be a process that we implement now moving forward, knowing that we're looking at the achievement gap a little different than maybe on the national average we look at it?
Right. Well, the way that we selected the materials is definitely a collaborative process. We consider several reputable publishers whose work and what they're providing to us has been research-based and proven to work. And then we gather groups of teachers who pilot the materials and provide feedback. And, it's a very long process. It takes at least a year to be able to pilot and gather all the information per content area, which is why it's taken 5 years. We're wrapping up the initial adoption cycle at the end of this year. Now, the reason why we're doing all of them at once is of no fault of anyone, but we had a situation where there was curriculum purchased in, say, 2004, and then, it got older, and by 2009, 2010, we should have been purchasing new materials, right, because it's getting older. But at that same time, we had the Common Core state standards come out. So nobody was going to buy something that a publisher just stuck a sticker on that said Common Core aligned, because anything could be Common Core aligned if you were willing to go from page 30 to page 79 to page 2. So we really needed to wait for the publishers to catch up. And they were starting to catch up in about 2014, 2015, and the strongest area that we saw of need, the immediate need, was in the area of math, and that was a result of, looking at test scores and our ability to continually have our students growing. So that was when we started our first curriculum adoption, and it's followed that process where it's been a very collaborative effort with a lot of teacher input, because you really want the people who are using the materials to feel comfortable with them and to feel like they're going to be able to make an impact on students. And what was the second part of your question, Mike?
That was it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what Mike said. Thanks for all the work and all the explanation, and this stuff is particularly fascinating to me. I just find it. I think there's a lot of, I guess, maybe myths or just things that you wouldn't think about that, at least in my mind, have been dispelled a little bit. I like the fact that all the emphasis on the oral proficiency part. I think that since I started paying attention, maybe I've been on the boards when my kids get it, we've heard so much about the importance of STEM. And I've always said, okay, maybe because of my field or whatever, but so maybe I have a bias. But, we've heard so much about the emphasis on STEM so much. I've always had a question about, putting aside whether or not you do well, you go that route in terms of eventually when these kids go to high school and college, that having a grasp of oral proficiency is the key for their learning at the younger ages and moving forward, regardless of what field that they eventually go in. And I'm happy that the district, through the Department of Instruction, is kind of understanding that and implementing that at a very early age. I know it's frustrating because, I mean, just as, like the math questions, even down to the very granular level where you have to explain your work so much nowadays verbally, where it's hard for me to help my kids sometimes with the math homework to kind of explain your answer, and it's like 2 + 2. It's like, okay, well, how do we explain this? But I think all of that just seeing the kids having to go through that exercise, I can kind of see the wheels turning, and maybe that's kind of how it seems that the studies and the research is kind of emphasizing that, and then connecting that with the issue of equity here about how important that oral proficiency part is. And so we have all these children who are not native English speakers, and we are not emphasizing that they need to get oral proficiency even in their own language. That's not a thought that any of us ever had, that should be an emphasis. So if I'm a kid who spoke Urdu when I was a kid in kindergarten, that's what what we spoke in the House. And, I think that it's important to understand that you're going to be behind if you don't even improve within your language. I mean, obviously, you're in two tracks because you're trying to learn English, but you don't want to also fall behind or learn English at the expense of just oral proficiency generally in your own language. So I know it's a tricky thing, but it looks like that's what the curriculum and the dual, culturally linguistically responsive teaching methodology is. So I'll never get the words right, but I think I understand it. I think it goes to dispelling some of the myths that I've heard for all my 4 years here, and I think it's exciting. I think that we probably, I think as the Equity Committee moves forward, we probably want to just now use the next few months of just kind of seeing how this is going, getting, like you said, board updates, and seeing how these changes result in further success for that bottom, 25% to see them get out of that. So that's exciting.
I feel like I heard you guys say that the achievement gap, based on the data that you collected and studied, that the achievement gap was not school exclusive. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Sure. So what that means is that there wasn't one school or 3 schools or 4 or 5 that seemed to contribute to the gap. There were no specific schools that always year after year had the highest proportion of students who were in that bottom quartile. It was distributed. And what that means is that we weren't really able to say it's this one building or it's this 2 buildings or 3 buildings that we need to be targeting. Instead, we saw that students were growing regardless of which building they were in, and that this is something that's impacting all of our schools in some capacity. Some might have a larger number of students initially, but we're still able to see that movement over time.
Which is why it's important that all of the initiatives that we're embarking upon or continuing are occurring in all of our schools.
Yeah, and I think that, when you're doing the statistical analysis and you're controlling for certain factors, and so you're not just looking at raw numbers of, okay, this is how many people are below the percentage at this school versus that school, and automatically coming to a conclusion that, well, this school is a problem, or this school, I got to get out of this school. So sometimes when I see that the previous presentation about people, migrating away from certain schools, I feel like there's some relation there as to misconceptions. And, there's that question that I was going to ask in your presentation, but there was no need because I knew this one was coming up, that, I think sometimes these misconceptions can contribute to some of the, and I don't know for sure, but it seems like you have these percentages of people leaving certain schools, and then you do the statistical analysis and you say that, well, that's, if you control for everything, that it's not a matter of one school versus the other. And as long as we continue to provide these initiatives at all the schools, like you said, I think that'll hopefully improve everyone's experience.
I'm proud that the group looked beyond what we always hear are the hypotheticals for what is really behind this achievement gap, and said, okay, let's look deeper than that. It may be these things, but let's look and see if there is something else underlying all that. And then what we find out means we're not going to target one specific school or one specific neighborhood or one specific ethnic group, which is fantastic. So every student will benefit from all the strategies you showed us. Every student will benefit. So it's not just those students who remain in that lowest quartile who will benefit from, the, what do you call it when you, the turn-in talks, or, all of these opportunities for language and the opportunities for advanced math and the opportunities for, new reading curriculum. Our entire district is going to benefit. So it's not just a case where I think we're going to start to see that bottom quartile rise up. We're going to see everybody benefit and everybody's scores rise up, because I think we took the time to start without preconceived notions and really think this through. So thank you.
On the topic of instructional coaches, we all know as we look at budget information that we've allocated some resources for additional instructional coaches this year. When did that program start?
The instructional coach program overall started in 2014, but the additional coaches came on this year. We added 2 additional coaches. There's one at Paddock, and there's one split between Carl Sandburg and Winston Campus Junior High.
Okay, great.
So, Dr. Arger, you had mentioned briefly that MAP testing was being done in Spanish now as well, and that there was a selection process for those certain students that would test. What is the selection process that we're using to determine whether a second grader should be testing in Spanish or they should be testing in English?
This is very fascinating. What we did is we took a study where we took about 700 students from our district that spoke Spanish as their native language, and we tested half of them in the Spanish language assessment and half of them in the English language assessment. And then what we did is we divided these students based upon their level of English proficiency. So each of these students take a test called the Access Test, and the Access Test renders an overall score that is a proxy for their approximate English proficiency level. And that score ranges anywhere from 1 to 6. Okay, good so far. And so then we looked at, say, well, if you are a Spanish speaker with a level 1 or level 2, how do you compare to a similar Spanish speaker taking the other test at a level 1 or level 2? And what we found was that there was a distinct advantage, for the most part always, for students who scored below 5. Now, 4.8 is the exit criteria. That's where you're declared English language proficient. But what we found is that if you are a native Spanish speaker and you are taking this test below that 5.0 score, you almost always outscore your comparison peers. And we found that occurred regardless of the achievement level from the testing period before. So these were equivalent groups. And really what we could tie this difference to was the different language that these tests were provided in. We do have a process where if schools identify a student who they have concern that this study might not be applicable for, they gather additional data, it goes into a form, and it communicates it directly to DOI, where we consult with that group and we can say, this particular profile of data does not indicate that this law of averages, if you will, holds for this student. So the study itself, was able to say, based upon your level of testing on this Access Test, what makes the most sense for which test to take. But again, we have a process just in case that the team is aware of information we wouldn't normally be, and they want to petition that this particular student would have a better test experience, a more valid test experience in English.
And is that accepted now for scoring-wise, or are we still using their English tests and just validating it against the Spanish test, or is that what we're using as our numbers that we're reporting to the state or we're receiving from the state as well?
So the MAP test is our local assessment system, and so there's no state implications for it. But for our local decision-making, the student's test in Spanish is used for decision-making just like your or my test in English would be used for, because that, we feel, is the better representation of their actual skills.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So looking at the presentation, and I noticed that you guys said that the major factors of the achievement gaps in the breakdown in like 3 categories. It was the oral language proficiency, and then the long-term English learner students, and then poverty. Obviously, I guess, how we're going to address each one of these is, I'm kind of curious about the long-term English learner. So when you say a long-term English learner, how do you define that? Like, what does that exactly mean? Is it that they're taking a long time to learn English, or is it that they're learning English later on in their life, or what is the long-term English learner?
The long-term English learner is the first scenario you said. It's children that are taking a longer time to learn English.
Okay.
So they've been with us, and in this particular case, they are children that started with us in 2nd grade and continued with us, and they're at 8th grade, and they're still in the EL program. They never reached the 4.8.
Cheryl, can you talk for a second about what we're doing at 3rd grade to increase their odds of becoming English language proficient sooner?
Right. So building on the whole oral language proficiency model, again, looking at data, and again, thanks to Laura and Tom, we throw all kinds of scenarios at them. Run this data, pull this, and they always do. So looking at a lot of data, what we were finding is that our children that were in, because we self-contained K-2 for our Spanish-speaking children, and then when they got to third, we started to see drops. We started to see the drop in the math score, math and ELA. And there's a language component of math as well. So we started looking at that. So what we had seen was when we had dual certified teachers, which are teachers that are bilingual certified and Gen Ed certified, if they were the teacher of the children, they were better able to support the language portion just because of their training and their cultural knowledge of the children. So we have begun moving a lot more of our staff that are dual certified into the third grade positions, which allows us a lot more. It's English learning all day long. So they have access to all kinds of strategies. They can definitely, because the teacher is bilingual, we still teach social studies and science, and in most cases we're still teaching math at third grade in Spanish. So it gives them a stronger foundation. So that's one way that we're addressing the long-term ELLs, because as we looked at where the children were at 8th grade and what had happened, because we can look at the trend data, what their profiles were earlier when they started to take the dive, and that they never recovered. So that's one way, is using our dual certified staff.
So you're saying addressing that is to continue teaching them in Spanish for a longer period of time?
They will get both. Right, currently what we do in the district, again, looking at this, because we actually saw this coming with the long-term ELLs, and it's not just District 15. Long-term ELLs in the nation it's a challenge. It's a challenge. It's not easy to learn a language, especially academic language. So we teach science and social studies for our children that are in our self-contained bilingual programs at K-2. And even if they exit the program on Access, we continue science and social studies in Spanish all the way up to 6th grade. And those are the children that would then feed into our junior high Spanish for native speaker classrooms to keep that oral language and that academic language in Spanish at a real level state in both Spanish and English. And Illinois is a state that adopted the seal of biliteracy. So talking with 211, they're like, some of our children that are coming out of our 8th grade are going into, if not 2nd grade or 2nd level Spanish, some of them are moving into 3rd year Spanish, which puts them in a great trajectory to get the seal of biliteracy on that diploma.
So I want to just thank the committee. I think this gives people a snapshot into the behind-the-scenes working. This is stuff that goes on a lot, and these people work hard behind the scenes trying to identify ways to improve the instruction. I think the equity committee is focused on those students that are underperforming, and what can we do to bring them up with their more average performing peers. And this has been great work. I want to thank you for that. I know it's just the first step, but if I could just summarize some of the major points that were made tonight. First of all, we want to make sure that every classroom, regardless of school, regardless of teacher, gets a viable curriculum. It's called what Laura referred to as a core curriculum. This is the curriculum that will prepare them for high school. Every child gets that. Now, some children need more than that, so they get Core Plus, and they get extended learning beyond the core because they are advanced beyond that. And in fact, some of them can be in advanced math classes. So we challenge all kids. But this committee has been looking at the kids that are below that. And so Laura indicated that there are tiers of support for kids. If you need a little support, you get Tier 1. If you need a lot more support, you get Tier 2. If you need a tremendous amount, you get Tier 3. And these folks have identified some things that are going to make a difference. And Frank, to your point, those long-term English language learners that don't perform well enough on the test to exit the program, it's probably because they don't have strong oral language proficiency. So we are working on ways to enhance that, particularly with those kids, and giving them more supports down here so that we can bring them up out of that lower level of performance. So it's very exciting work. And I know this is the first major step, but it gives you a snapshot into what they do on a daily basis and the things that are going on in the district that people wouldn't normally be aware of. But we are working hard, and they are working hard at making a difference for particularly those kids at the bottom levels, because if we don't bring them up, they're not going to be successful in high school, and they're not going to be college and career ready, and they're not going to contribute to the greater community. They're not going to also be fulfilled. And so we want to really take that responsibility to heart, and they're doing a good job at that. So thanks very much for the report tonight and for all your hard work.
Thank you.
I'm going to change the order just a little bit in my section. I'd like to bring up the associates from BWP, Dr. Joe Porto and Dr. Phil Eberhardt. If you would come up and just give the board an update on the status of finding my excellent replacement.
It's impossible.
Oh, gee.
We do our best.
And they did bring a calendar that I'm going to pass out for you to look at.
Well, good evening, Board. It's a pleasure to be with you again tonight. Our two other associates, Mark Friedman and Ann Nolan, could not be here tonight, but we've been in constant contact with them as well. So you have the timeline in front of you. We're going to start with the gray band that you see there, which is the board meeting tonight, to give you an update and to see where we are and where we will be going. The online survey will be launched for 1 week and has been posted on the website, and that will take place on September 17. That will be done both in English and also in Spanish to have that as well. On the 25th, we'll be spending a lot of time in the district on that day with the focus groups that have been identified and working with the stakeholders face-to-face on doing that. That's one of the reasons that we have 4 associates working on this, so that we can make sure we're very thorough and do it with fidelity on our focus groups with that as well. The online stakeholder survey then will be completed on September 26th. We'll then take that information and then compile that and provide that to the board. And we would encourage you to put that on the website as well, so that's known throughout the community with that too. The last day for applications to be submitted will be that first week in November, November 7. Joe, could you share with the group how many applications we have so far?
Last time that I checked, we had 20 applications. I'd say 17 were from Illinois, 3 from out of state. And I think with the timeline that we have, we could probably anticipate 30, maybe 40 total. So we're going to have, we've had very nice interest up till now, a nice diversity of candidates, and we're very confident we're going to be able to bring you a real strong, solid slate.
And then on October 25, we've already worked together as our team at BWP, and we'll be conducting those screening interviews of approximately 12. We'll know better once we have the total pool to look at as well. Right after that, in the first week of November, at the November 5 board meeting, we'll be presenting to you the profile, which I mentioned before, a slate of candidates, and then we'll conduct a workshop with the board on that. With the slating of candidates and the conducting of the workshop with the board, that'll be done in closed session, obviously for confidential reasons for that. Shortly thereafter, on the 10th, there'll be a special board meeting, and that's when the board will conduct their first round of interviews of probably 6. But that could vary depending upon the number that we have with that. Typically, those are done in hour and 15-minute timelines, and we will work with you on setting up those interviews. We'll have a template all set up with you. And that'll, of course, be in closed session from 8 o'clock until 4 o'clock. So, board, you're going to be very busy on that day, but it'll be very exciting with that as well. The next round will be to have the board conducting interviews for 2 or 3 of the finalist candidates for that. There will be a separate dinner on each evening for you to get to know the candidates better in an informal setting, which we have found to be very insightful with that as well. And that will be done in closed session, obviously, also with that. We have earmarked the week of December 3, if the board would like to conduct site visits of the finalists if they decide to do so. That obviously can be done or can't be done, but that's a bridge the board can cross once you get to that area with that. And we just remind you that you can't have any more than 2 board members going for the Open Meetings Act, which I know you're well aware of with that. Our goal will then to be have the contract completed and then to have the candidate formally approved at your December 12 meeting to do that as well. So we wanted to give you just an overview so you knew where we were in that process, and we'd be more than happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
If I could jump in before questions, Mark Friedman and I talked earlier this week, and the information that they're going to be obtaining from the stakeholder groups and from the survey, and actually they'd like to have at least a half-an-hour interview with all of you, and so they would like to arrange a time to talk with you individually for a half an hour to get your insights, and that all that information is to try to design a profile for the next superintendent. And then, of course, they'll use that profile to evaluate the applicants and through the interview process to make sure that the applicants align with what the profile tells them that they need for this district. So be aware of that. They will be in the district on the 25th, so if that's a good day, we could arrange a half an hour then. Otherwise, they can arrange a phone call or something for you.
We're very flexible with that, whatever works for your schedule.
So really kind of just quickly building off that for anybody that's watching, the stakeholder survey is extremely important. So please talk to your friends, classmates, neighbors, whoever, to make sure that anybody who has an opportunity fills it out. I know Morgan's going to do everything she can to get it out to as many people as possible, but still word of mouth is the best way to do it. So we do take that into consideration.
And we struggle to get common citizens, as everybody knows, to respond to things like that. Parents and people that are associated with the district directly are easiest to hit. So if anybody's got a clever way of hitting all the people that we never get, that would be wonderful.
On the 25th, they'll be meeting with union presidents, they'll be meeting with administrators, our cabinet, and principals. They'll be meeting with the PTA presidents, the BPAC, PTA presidents. They'll be meeting with staff at 2 locations throughout the district so that 2 consultants will be at one building, 2 at another. They'll have the opportunity for staff from every level to come and give their input. And then finally in the evening, they'll have a general session open to the general public. So if they wanted to give something beyond what's in the survey, they can come to a face-to-face meeting and talk with the consultants at that meeting. So
We're trying to work very hard on making sure there's every opportunity for people to provide feedback, which is very critical with that. Again, that's why we have 4 people, so that we can really do that with a lot of quality.
We'll be using 3 basic questions to structure those input gathering sessions. Strengths that you're proud of and you want to see continued, any areas for growth, and then characteristics you're looking for in your next superintendent. And Scott articulated this very nicely before, but we can't stress how important that profile becomes. Not only will it be used to evaluate candidates, but even before then, we use the profile to structure the questions that we ask during the screening. And when we work with the board to help you develop your questions, it'll be around these characteristics, and then they'll be evaluated as such. So it's not just a gesture of, give us your input so you feel good about the process. It's a very crucial part of the process. So if you can't make it in, please do those surveys, and we read every one of them.
Well, Phil and Joe, thanks for dusting off a tie, putting it on tonight and coming. We appreciate you making the time to come here.
Thanks for adjusting the schedule here to the agenda. We appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
All right, we're going to move back to the agenda, and I'd like to ask David Morris and Larry Sasso to come up, and they're going to be talking about their school improvement plans at their particular buildings. Jennifer, while they're coming up, Jennifer Costanzo is here. She is our architect of record from STR. Nice to have you here. Did you want to say anything, or are you just observing tonight? Okay. Glad you're here. Thanks, Jennifer.
So I was going to bring Scrapper in tonight, but he was very busy, but that is Scrapper. Dr. Thompson, President Shupai, Board of Education, thank you for the opportunity to give myself, and Pleasant Hill an opportunity to share with you our school improvement plan. As you can see, our school improvement team, and this is great because it kind of piggybacks what the committee was talking about, and now you can hear what, as a school, we are doing to continue and foster that improvement. Our committee at Pleasant Hill represents all grade levels, and we try to get teachers that show leadership qualities, as well as teachers that are interested and involved in wanting to look at school improvement at a level that requires a lot of statistical data and a lot of time to discuss. And we also bring on our school psychologist and our ESL teacher, as well as myself and my assistant principal. So our journey began during the 2017 school year with the guidance from Dr. Edgar, Mr. Carmody, Dr. Schnorr, and the Department of Instruction. Our staff began the process of DataWise, which was to look at our school's academic performance and to begin to determine our school's academic focus. As a staff, we realized that we do have much to celebrate at Pleasant Hill in regards to our student achievement. But when we dug deeper into the data from a growth perspective, we found that there were plenty of opportunities for improvement. At the beginning of the school year in 2017, our staff met and spent time looking at our students and how they performed in reading and math. We examined data from MAP, PARC, and Access, just to name a few. And we also looked at how students with IEPs performed, as well as our students in the ESL program and our student ethnic makeup. Based on the data and with the use of a protocol activity at a staff meeting, we were able to determine our focus. This protocol required all of our staff members to participate. We looked at data, we had data up, we had discussions, and we had some very important and heated discussions about where we were as a school. We did conclude that improving student growth for students in reading would be our priority, so literacy was our focus. We also felt that although literacy was our focus, improving the students' literacy also impacts our students' math and all the other core content areas. The next step in our journey required us to examine reading, but to determine what area of literacy is our learner-centered priority. So we call it our LCP. Our school improvement team worked with Dr. Edgar and Mr. Carmody to develop and implement protocols to use with the staff to determine our learner-centered priority. We felt as a team that we had the data to support the overall decision to focus on reading, but we needed more authentic data from the classrooms to determine what about reading our students needed to improve on and to ultimately improve our student growth. We reviewed school-wide and classroom assessments, and most importantly, teacher input on what they were seeing in the classrooms and what they were noticing with the students. When teachers and students interact in literacy, teachers get a feel and they hear and they see where students are at. So the input coming from the teachers was extremely important, as well as those formative and summative assessments that teachers give on a daily basis that you would not see in the standardized test results that just shows you what the whole school is doing. So those discussions were very important and very valuable for us to determine if we're going to say reading is our area, what's that focus going to look like? After an extensive analysis and those productive discussions, we concluded that our students do a great job with reading a text. We call them word callers. We have students that will tell you they've read the Harry Potter books, but if you ask them exactly what happened in the books, sometimes it's a struggle. But reading the words for a lot of students is not an issue. They also do a great job of reading the text and comprehending at the literal level. We find that a lot of students at Pleasant Hill can tell you setting, can tell you character, can tell you, the basic literal aspects of what's going on in the text. But what we found through all of these discussions was that a majority of our students are lacking in that proficiency of inferencing, of being able to take a text and take it from the literal level and go infer into why things are happening. What do they feel is the reason why the characters are interacting the way they do, rather than answering a question like, what color hat did Johnny wear when he went out? So students were having that difficulty, and our learner-centered priority became that students were having difficulty making logical inferences based on the text evidence. With our learner-centered priorities set, it was time for us to analyze our instructional practices. As a school, we wanted to determine where our most pressing need was in how we teach reading relating to our focus of improving a student's ability to make those logical inferences. We really wanted our students to become deep thinkers, analyzers, and be able to go beyond the literal level. Much like what was discussed earlier with students being able to analyze and with the STEM comment that was made, now the curriculum is being infused more with we need students to explain, to be able to explain. So this ties nicely into our math, as I said before, and our other core contents. To achieve some of this, we began to create what are called look-fors. So for myself and my assistant principal, these were look-fors that we wanted to, when we went into classroom, see. And we created this with our school improvement team, and we spent a lot of time developing what type of skills do students need to be able to become good at inferencing. So over a 4-week period, anonymous data was collected that included all 22 classrooms at Pleasant Hill. Using a checklist of the identified look-fors that included, but were not limited to, some observable interactions such as teachers prompting students to cite evidence, what was discussed earlier by the group before, students engaged in discussions with each other, and teachers using higher level questions. And a key that sometimes is often missed is our students using higher level questioning when they are asking about the text that they read. Those are just a few examples. There were others that we had on our checklist that we were looking at when we went in and out of the classrooms of what myself and my assistant principal were looking to gather data. This data was brought back to the school improvement team to analyze, and then we presented it to the staff. We concluded that an area that stood out the most revolved around questioning skills. We found that students were not using higher level questioning when making inferences about the text to their teachers. We also found that there was a need to infuse more higher level questionings ourselves as a staff and as teachers. So this prompted us to examine how as teachers we are using higher level questioning when discussing text with students. Once we were able to determine through the walkthrough data that in our instruction we could improve on, teachers began to focus on this strategy as well as to continue to focus on the other identified look-fors that were being observed. As part of our action plan, one of our early release Fridays as part of our action plan, the staff came together and said, could we have a day or a Friday in an early release where we can collaborate and we can look at data and we can look at what we are doing as grade levels and well as cross-grade levels in the area of reading to look at our school improvement. Those collaborative days, I will tell you, have turned into, I'll use Cheryl's word, magical days. The teachers really wanted these days not to be days where we talked about field trips and we talked about what kids did that day and we waited and used those 40 minutes in a way that wasn't productive. They wanted to use those days to look at data, to look at our school improvement goal, to look at where are we as a grade level, what common assessments can we give to look at where are our third graders, okay, what areas do we need to work on, what areas do we need to continue, what areas can we move forward on. To become more of a professional learning community was the goal. So that was part of our action plan, was to instill that. We have minutes, agendas, team leaders, and protocols that the grade levels developed so that these meetings run as they are intended. Another component to our action plan involved discussing ways in which we could eventually allow teachers on a voluntary basis. And I will tell you, our teachers said they are ready to explore this, which was, as a principal, exciting news for me. And this was on a voluntary basis to view each other in their classrooms, to see what's going on. Because as we know, sometimes sharing is very hard for people. And in this case, the staff at Pleasant Hill is willing to say, come to my classroom as a colleague, see what's going on, and let's talk about it and share those ideas. And whether they are questions that we have, or whether they have, well, how did you get that student to do that? Or, what's that instructional strategy you're using? I've never seen that before. Instead of me standing up in front of them and talking about these things, hearing it from your colleagues, feeling comfortable having them in your classroom, I think is an excellent practice. As a SIP team, we also determined that there is a need to look at utilizing district resources such as the instructional coaches, Department of Instruction, and others to professionally develop teachers in our focus area. And just recently, teachers came up to me asking, can we have some professional development on, now our focus is reading, but they said guided math. And I said, this is an awesome opportunity, because obviously guided math, guided reading is blending. And DOI was happy, and we have someone coming up Friday to professionally develop our teachers in that. But I just wanted to show how our teachers are very, very involved and very willing to move forward with our goal. So as we closed out the 2017-18 school year and began this school year, we were very positive in the work that we did and the progress we were making. As I walked through the classrooms, I could see and hear teachers putting the emphasis on the look-fors that we were discussing. And I could see and hear students, amazingly, when they ask higher level questions, it's almost like you feel like you're walking into almost a college lecture sometimes, but their questioning is so thought out, and the teacher's ability to then respond to those questions, but then say, but take it a step further. And we call those why questions. Never be afraid of the why questions. And as we all know, when kids are little, they ask a lot of why questions, and we as parents and adults sometimes don't want to hear those questions, but that is something that we want to capture, and we are not going to not hear them. Ask as many why questions as you want. Our next steps this school year is also to continue to look at student data to determine our progress on improvement in student literacy growth. Continue to do those walkthroughs. We're going to do those again this year and gather the data to see where we are in our classrooms. Refine and continue to develop our team collaborative days. Last year was the first year of it, so this year we want to look at those minutes and agendas. We want to be able to provide more data for teams, and myself and my assistant principal be more available to answer any questions that they have. We also want to continue to provide feedback to teachers and identify those needed professional development opportunities that they're asking for. And lastly, we talked about at the beginning of this school year looking at the board's strategic plan and implementing a social-emotional learning goal to Pleasant Hill. This year we did start and I know Lake Louise came up with their Respectables and the program of Expect Respect, and this is our first year of implementing that at Pleasant Hill to support the district's strategic plan as well. So overall at Pleasant Hill, we are very proud of the progress that we've made. We cannot thank Dr. Edgar, Dr. Schnorr, and Mr. Carmody enough for their time, support, being there when we needed them, coming to meetings, helping me out, learn the process, and moving forward. So I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity and listening to our journey, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'd also like to thank Dr. Thompson, President Chupai, and the rest of the school board for allowing me to get up here and talk about TJ's journey. We, as administrators and some members of the school improvement team, have started the data wise process 3 years ago. We've been learning about the steps talking through and becoming more lead learners. 2 years ago is when our staff became more intimately involved in the school improvement process. So that's why the years are from 2017 to now. Similar to David, we have the names of the people that are on our school improvement team. Not that you would necessarily know who they are, but to show that we have a wide range of expertise and we're representing all of our students in our school. You're going to hear some of the similar types of process because we're going through the same data-wise steps. The first thing that we had to do last year was determine what our focus would be. So at the beginning of the school year, at our Institute Day, we had our entire staff look at the data, our map data, park data, our access data, both in the areas of math and reading, look for trends. But as we started to look a little bit deeper and looking at some of those trends and looking at some of the grade level data and our subgroups, we narrowed our focus to the area of reading. When we started to look at the area of reading, we decided that the map data would give us the most consistent information. And most importantly, it's a component that shares how students are growing from year to year and within the year. So we really started to focus on our map data. We landed on reading as the area to focus on. Similar to what David said, when we looked at our trends, we saw areas that we could improve on in the area of math as well, but we felt that focusing on reading would also give us the greatest impact or bang for its buck, and we'd be able to see the benefits in other subject areas as well. I think this is a good point to stop to talk a little bit about what the specific process looked like at TJ. So looking at our learner-centered priority, we followed this same type of process with every single step. We would ask staff or do some type of protocol to get information from them. We would bring that information back to our school improvement team, analyze that information, kind of draw some conclusions, share that back with our staff to make sure everyone had the same understanding, and then move on to the next step. So that's what we did for our learner-centered priority. So the first question we asked the staff are, what assessments do we already have in the classrooms that give us information about our students and their reading? And we created a Google form so everyone could see what everybody was writing, and they were just listing all the assessments they do in their classroom related to reading. And we specifically asked teachers, if you see a certain assessment written once, you need to write it as well, because we really want to look at are there any common assessments that go across all the grade levels? And what we determined when we had everyone give us their input, we landed on the Fontes and Pinnell assessment. It's a reading assessment that's done on an individual basis, and it gives each teacher valuable information about a student's reading ability. So then we said, okay, if we're going to focus on Fontes and Pinnell and the data that presents, let's look for some trends in that area. What do we see? Do we see any patterns in that assessment and the data? Similar to David and Pleasant Hill, what we saw as the most prevalent issue with our students was answering comprehension questions that went beyond the text. That was the phrase that we kept using, was that beyond the text. But it's that inferential questioning, reading something and then reading between the lines, or making inferences, or making predictions for the future. That's where we saw our students struggling the most. This is probably one of the most important slides in my presentation because of the second bullet point. I've been in 3 different school districts, and I've worked on school improvement plans for many, many years. Typically, what our school improvement plans have been in the past is coming up with a goal, and then at the end of the year, measuring that goal. And then maybe making some changes for the next year or coming up with another goal. Certainly, there would be conversations about instruction, but for the first time, we're really looking at our instruction and the impact that it has on the goal that we're setting. So what we did to examine our instruction is we began our walkthroughs. So our school improvement team came up with 4 look-fors, things that we should notice or we all agree would see in the classroom that teachers and students would be doing that fell into the category of answering questions beyond the text. So similar, Mrs. Reedman, my assistant principal, who's in the audience, she and I walked through our classrooms and gathered all this data with a laser focus on those look-fors. They were very brief, but they were frequent. And then what we did is we shared all that data as well with our staff. So we used some protocols with our staff to look at what they noticed in all our walkthroughs. They were anonymous as well, but they were divided up by grade levels. There was no judgment, there was no evaluation. We asked staff, let's come up with some quantitative and qualitative interpretations of what the data presents. So our staff did that. The SIP team took their interpretations back to our committee. We looked at that a little deeper and then came up with our next step, which was our instructional priority, which is that what we noticed, what came out, was that as teachers, we weren't providing enough opportunities for students to be answering beyond the text types of questions. So then what's next? Then the next step is how are we going to address that? So this year, or at the end of last year, we came up with what steps we were going to take a part of in our school to address this area of providing more opportunities for students to be answering questions beyond the text. And I should say in quotes, because when I talk about text, students can be answering questions beyond the text or what's not right in front of them in reading, certainly, but in math, in PE, art, music, all different areas. So when we came up with our 5 points or 5 steps that we were going to introduce this year to address that issue, I don't want to go into the specifics, but as part of that process, we are going to be identifying a common language, common terminology that we should be hearing and seeing in our classrooms when we're talking and getting students to be thinking beyond the text. Talking about exemplars. What does it look like in a reading class, certainly, but what does it look like in a math class? How can a math discussion impact beyond the text? What might it look like in a PE class? And having all the teachers having an understanding of what those exemplars are. And then probably the most exciting part is giving that time for teachers then to reflect on their instruction. So last year we did our walkthroughs in the spring, and then we shared our data, and we made some decisions. This year, we've moved everything up. We hope to be sharing walkthrough data in January, possibly at our Institute Day, so that we could go through the same process again, but then teachers can then use that data and use the interpretations to make some changes if need be in instruction for the rest of their school year, as opposed to the following school year. So I'm very excited about this timeline that we have. As David said, we also want to be in line with the board's strategic goals, so we'll be looking at implementing a social emotional learning goal as well. We already have a very strong PBIS structures set up at TJ, so we'll be using a lot of the data that we have already to help us develop what that SEL goal would be. Again, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity. Do you have any questions for us?
Can I ask you a question about look-fors? When you talk about look-fors, what are you looking for?
So we identified, I actually have the specifics, but they were like students would cite verbally or in written form, they would identify a character's traits and how they changed over time. So we would look for that, because if we saw that happening, they're thinking beyond the text because they're starting to draw predictions. That's just one of our look-fors.
Yep, great, makes sense.
Dr. Morris? Dr. Sasso, thanks very much. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
This reminds me of our defense of our dissertation. we did it together.
Oh.
Not together, the dissertations, but the same school, so I feel
So
like
we
we're-
just need to ask a lot
Yes,
more
I feel like
questions,
I'm
right?
so well prepared for No, not a lot of
Thank you very
questions.
Thank you. All right, just a couple more things in my section. First, I just wanted to give you an update on the Boundaries Task Force. That was the task force designed to address the emphasis the board has on a long-term space utilization plan. And as you saw it earlier tonight, we have some of our schools that are bursting at the seams, others where there's expanding space becoming available. And so we did put out a request for people to apply to be part of the task force. And I'm happy to say that Morgan, again, did a nice job. We had 224 people apply for the 15 to 20 spots. So there were a few people that were already selected. The co-chairs were already selected. I'm going to be part of that committee. There are a few people that were identified early on that have already been working on boundaries, but they're probably close to 15 to 18 spots still available. And the co-chairs were tasked with finding out which people would represent the district well in all of its differences and all of its different geographical areas. And they've sent me that list, and so we will be inviting those people to come. I haven't opened it yet, but they sent me their selection, and we'll be sending those people out information about being a part of that task force. They know the date already, which I think it's the 24th, is that right, Julie? 27th, one of the two of those days. We went back and forth. But they will be meeting on that night, and their goal, really, for the task force goal, will be to examine current boundaries, the anomalies that occur right now because of those boundaries, some of our schools that are problematic because of the number of kids in them, and after they've got a nice foundation of what currently exists, then they'll be brainstorming about what things do they want to try to address as they move forward. And I think that they will identify some things that they would like the administration to work on before the next meeting, so the administration will bring back some more information for them. At the second meeting, they'll also design a survey that can go out to the community so that we can identify from the community what is it that they see are crucial issues as we look at our boundaries, our current boundaries. What would they like to see moving forward in the future? And I think from that list, then, the task force can identify what the community's interests and priorities are, and they can use those then to hopefully design a few possible scenarios of what boundaries could look like in the future. And I think the goal then would be for the task force to get feedback again from the community And after they get feedback from the community on their possible scenarios, they would then bring before the board probably 3 scenarios and let the board decide about if any one of those 3 seem like the way that they'd like to move in the future. They'll also be using our consultants that we've hired and the software that they provide so that we'll be able to use that to manipulate some of the specifics in the district to see which boundaries might work well. So excited about that. And I think you'll be getting some feedback and some updates as we move forward on that.
So the size of the committee, you said it's going to be about 20 people?
Yeah, I think so, workable. I think my hope is, though, that of those 224, that there are only 20 selected. The other 200, we'd like to involve them as well. So I think that we will share with them the minutes of the meetings, and we'll also then share some of the direction that the task force has given to the administration, that the things they're working on, so that we can get some interim feedback from those 20 people that showed interest, and they can be a part of it electronically, not physically at the specific task force. So we appreciate their interest, want to keep them involved, and I think that's a way that we can do that.
Okay.
So the last thing is I just want to update you on our Park Place progress. As you know, we had a 150-day due diligence period, and that is coming to an end November 6th. We have been working very hard to try to get over the next hurdle, which really is getting approval from the village for a special use for that space, because it's zoned for retail only. It's not zoned for use as a school. So we've been working with the village, and we're going through the process of going through the Planning and Zoning Committee. We will be sending out many letters to the people that live within 250 feet of the building, letting them know about the hearing. We'll be going before the Planning and Zoning Committee to make our case that this should be available for us to use as a school, why it would make sense. And hopefully that they'll approve that and then send it to the full village council. And we would then go before the village council. I think the date now is middle of October. October 11th or 18th, I think is the date. So we're hoping that we'll get before the entire village council at that point. And if we receive approval from the village council for a special use for that space, then we would be able to come back to the board and ask them what their thoughts were about moving forward with using the space as a school. And it would be up to the board at that point to say yes or no. And at that point, if it was no, we'd get our money back and we would go to another plan. So that's kind of where we are with Park Place. Still kind of an exciting concept. I hope you see it as an exciting concept. It's an option until the village board says no, but we're hoping that they'll look at it positively and favorably. Any questions?
We don't have anything on the calendar that sort of aligns with that time frame.
Right, we don't. So I'm thinking that if the village council approves the special use, that we'll ask for an extension on the due diligence period for the November board meeting. I don't think that we need to have a special board meeting in order to work on this, but we'll see how it goes. But I think that we can get a week extension so that we can cover the board meeting and have the board make a decision by then. It works. I did just want to take the opportunity to say Mike Scaletta is here with us. Mike's the new principal at Whiteley. Mike, we're going to invite you back to the next meeting to introduce you to the board, but we might save you a trip since Mike has 3 boys at home and his wife might be very happy if he stays home next board meeting. So Mike Scaletta, the new principal at Frank C. Whiteley, we're glad he joined the team. He's doing a great job over there. A lot of needy students at Whiteley, and he's done a great job.
Welcome.
That's it for me.
All right. We will now open our meeting for public comment. Please remember that this is not a dialogue between you and the board. If you have a specific issue which requires a response, Superintendent Thompson will get back to you. Please state your name and identify any group that you represent. Also, please limit your remarks to no more than 5 minutes. If someone previously has articulated something with which you agree, please state that you agree rather than repeating the entire comment. And finally, avoid any comments specific to any person, student, staff member, respecting their right to privacy. Kelly Svierzek?
Yeah, close enough.
How close?
Swerzak.
Swerzak. Close. I'll get it right next time.
Welcome, Kelly. Thanks. Have a seat.
Thank you. As a parent and fellow educator, I just have a question really directed at the board and possibly, I'm assuming the DOI is the Department of Instruction. So while it sounds very nice that District 15 has these different tiered interventions, when it comes down to a building-based level, it is very evident that, at least at Winston Campus Elementary, that there is not a Tier 2 math program that is currently being offered. I have researched and asked questions amongst the administration, amongst the teachers, and then on my own behalf of parents who just are uneducated or have a kid that is on the bubble. And there is not a guaranteed and viable curriculum that anyone can point me to. I've heard word that there has been different pilots being offered, but if I was to ask for Winston campus, what are you using for a Tier 2 math intervention? They say, we currently don't have one in place. And we understand your frustration as a fellow parent. So I am just here to make that known to the board. That's how it's coming across, even though the presentation says that we have MTSS is in place. It sounds nice, but when it comes down to a building level, I don't see it taking place, and this is not the first year that I have inquired about this concern.
Well, Kelly, that concerns me, so I will look into it, and I will definitely get back to you. I'll reach back out to you. Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you. So we have to go back.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. May I have a motion for the reading and acceptance of minutes, please?
I make a motion to approve the minutes from the following meeting of the Board of Education, August 15th, 2018, regular Board of Education meeting.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Iannarino.
Aye.
Porter.
Aye.
Kane.
Aye.
Khan.
Aye.
Smolka.
Aye.
Shupai.
Aye.
Wong.
Aye.
Motion carries. Action items, item 18920, the personnel report. May I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to approve the September 12th, 2018 personnel report as presented.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Porter.
Aye.
Kane.
Aye.
Khan.
Aye.
Smolka.
Aye.
Shupai.
Aye.
Wong.
Aye.
Iannarino.
Aye.
Motion carries. We're going to go back to the first page of the agenda now.
I know I started this off by goofing things up, so we're just having a, we're having a mess.
Lisa's going to like that.
Yeah, no kidding. What time is that? Yeah.
I like to do that just so I can go home.
You know what? It is his birthday. He doesn't want to. It's his birthday.
Yeah, his birthday. Happy birthday.
Happy 21st, Frank.
21st, right? And on that note, Frank, because you did such a great job of covering Ed Red for us, it's all you.
I make a
All right,
motion
so just
to,
a few things of note.
I make a motion to declare September 12th, 2018 Frank Iannarino Day. Any seconds?
I believe it's a really big Frank Iannarino Day also. I think it's the big 5-0 today.
Okay, let's talk about Ed Red now. So the governor, even though it didn't really apply to us too much, or really at all, he did veto the salary bill that was going to put a minimum requirement there that would have affected other districts, but it doesn't really affect us. The other thing was something, he vetoed that PE bill, which would have mandated us having a lot more PE hours every week, which would have really been kind of a mess, so it's good that that was vetoed. And then he signed off on that lunch bill, so for kids that are having a hard time, I guess, paying for the lunches there, now they can carry I guess a debt up to like $500. So those are the high points, and we can just move on.
All right, 1-5 Foundation, Mrs. Kane.
No updates this month.
Finance Committee, Mr. Board.
So Finance Committee, we met this evening, and we had a few agenda items. First being reviewing the remaining life safety priority B items. We also had a proposed summer 2019 construction projects that we'd covered, and then the review of the 5-year forecast, which I'll have Dave go through. But as far as the remaining life safety priority B items, again, we're working on a long-term plan for the capital projects. We have reduced about $50 million over the last few years on those, but we still have a ways to go. And as far as the list of projects, we had a list of 4 projects that we discussed and reduced down to 3, basically just based on need and necessity. So I went to the Univent replacement at Lincoln, just due to the age and difficulty in finding replacement parts. The roof replacement at Walter Sunling, and then also roof replacement at Central Road, which we combined into mechanicals as well. So rather just get everything done in one fell swoop. So kind of similar to what we did this past year instead of piecemealing things together. So that comes into a tune just under $7 million. But that's where we're at.
So we're kind of asking the board's consent to go forward. We'll be bringing to you an RFP to go out to bid for those things, and then once we receive the bids back, we'll ask you to approve those projects for the summer, but that's the committee's recommendation for these upcoming summer's projects.
Yeah, we also looked at a roof replacement at Jane Addams as a possibility, but the mechanicals that Anthony mentioned about at Central Road, basically to replace the roof at Central Road, you have to pull the roof units off, build around it, and then put it back on. Their useful life is in the 1 to 2 year range, maybe a few more if you pushed it, but you'd be risking them going back on and everything working smoothly after removing them, and then you'd have to remove them again in a couple of years. So that's not an insignificant additive. The roof is about $1 million. The mechanicals is another $1 million too. But that caused us to prioritize that and push the Jane Addams roof to another year. These are some of the additional projects that we looked at last year and were unable to prioritize, and so they're just rolling into here. So it's a continuation on what we've planned on in the past. And then from a budget standpoint, we looked at the 5-year forecast. Mike and team had prepared good, consistent view with it. We did look at sort of what it would be with Park Place operating costs, not the purchase acquisition and sort of the one-time costs from that, but the ongoing costs and what that would do from a budgetary standpoint. And then looked at that sort of taking a different view on educational salaries, using some of the forecasts from the original CTC contract versus where we're at now, which is actually a little more favorable. And then also looking at it if we had a more favorable outcome on health insurance scenarios where we've continued to forecast it more conservatively than we've seen. So everything sort of puts us in a balance at the end of the 5-year period in about the 30 to 40% range, pretty much right in the middle of that from a percent of operating costs as the fund balance. So good pressure testing of the forecast as we've looked at it.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's it.
Equity Committee, Mr. Cobb?
Nothing really to report. This was the kind of result of all the meetings, so there wasn't anything additional.
Beautiful. Superintendent's Communication Committee?
I provided you with the minutes that Morgan took, and we had a productive meeting. I think, as you can see, a lot of things are being accomplished, and she has a lot of goals for communication moving forward, so we're excited about those. She'll be instrumental in the Boundary Committee, Boundary Task Force, the superintendent search, and she's working on some new logos for every building in the district, which are going to be kind of exciting, I think. But she's, you can see the goals there, and feel free to reach out to me or her if you'd like to talk about those.
Will do. All right. Anybody have an issue with going back to action items? Item 18921, motion please.
Make a motion to approve the adoption of the 2018-19 budget as presented.
Second. Discussion?
Just the one other item that I'd mentioned on this is when we went through the 19 summer of 19 plan, we did talk about the long-term board goal we set of having a longer view of the facilities plan and the need to continue that conversation, looking at the life safety projects that were identified as well as any other necessary repairs. So we're going to continue to build that out. What's in the budget is appropriate for 18-19. 35% of the summer of 19 projects roll into the budget for 18-19, with the remainder going into 19. It really all comes down to the timing of when the work is done in the summer. Like you said, if it's done by the end of June,
It's done prior to June 30th, it's charged 18-19. July 1 and after, it's 19-20.
which is just a budget, annual effect. The cost is the cost.
I think we're all, at least I think we're all aware that the goal to do that, to stay on top of maintenance and minimize the longer term waiting till the end and doing a bunch of life safety things, that goal will be outside of the typical, but that's important.
And I'm sorry, just briefly on this one slide here, Dave, you and Anthony talked about, we're looking at doing 3 capital improvement projects, and here it's projected out of 2009, 4 projects. Just making sure that I'm understanding correctly, is that we're not talking about doing the Central Road right now? Is that what?
Not Jane Addams.
Not Jane Addams, I'm sorry. So Central Road, Sunlane, and Lincoln those 3 projects are what we're projecting out. The recommendation will be to the board.
Plus the Central Road.
Plus the mechanicals of Central Road.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
So it's a slight cost savings from what was in there, but
okay,
a couple $100,000.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Any other questions, discussion, commentary? Roll call?
Kane?
Aye.
Khan?
Aye.
Smolka?
Aye.
Shupai?
Aye.
Wong?
Aye.
Andreino?
Aye.
Porter?
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 18-922, motion please.
I make a motion to approve the resolution authorizing Community Consolidated School District 15 conveyance to City of Rolling Meadows, authorizing the transfer of real property as presented.
Second,
Second.
discussion?
We just have a brief discussion on what exactly this is. I know I read, it looks like we're transferring
Oh, the attorney needs kicking in, as I can tell, yeah.
1/10 of an acre, less than 1/10 of an acre.
In theory, and I guess in practicality, we've already given them property.
Sure.
This is just formalizing it through legal ways so that they can apply for the grant to replace the bridge. So this is just a good gesture to make the community a better place, giving them the land that we really didn't use anyhow. We've already kind of endowed them that land. So this is the process that they had to go through in order to obtain the money from the grant.
It's land that's actually like outside of like the fenced area of the school, so it's not even like it's really anything gets used at all.
It almost looks like an
Kind
easement
of weird,
would
like it
be.
doesn't even really belong to the school anyways. I mean, it's like the side of the bridge.
Yeah, it's more Rolling Meadows High School property than it is ours, so.
Little triangle.
At one time, it was our property, so.
Thanks, I just wanted clarification.
All right. Shall we roll call on giving it to them?
Khan?
Aye.
Smolka?
Aye.
Shupai?
Aye.
Wong?
Aye.
Andreino?
Aye.
Porter?
Aye.
Kane?
Aye. Motion carries. Item 18-923, motion please.
I make a motion to approve the renewal of the annual telecommunications maintenance agreement with Telecom Innovations Group, Itasca, Illinois, at a cost of $26,457, same amount as we have in previous years, as presented. The agreement will cover the district's MyTel 3300 telecommunications system from September 9th of 2018 through September 9th of 2019.
Second,
Second.
discussion. Roll call?
Smolka?
Aye.
Shupai?
Aye.
Wong?
Aye.
Andreino?
Aye.
Porter?
Aye.
Kane?
Aye.
Khan?
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 18-924, motion please.
I make a motion to award the contract for the electronic communications and collect network bid 19-003 to ITR Downers Grove, Illinois, in the amount of $44,290 as recommended. The award is based on lowest vendor meeting bid specifications.
Second,
Second.
discussion. Roll call?
Shupai?
Aye.
Wong?
Aye.
Andreino?
Aye.
Porter?
Aye.
Kane?
Aye.
Khan?
Aye.
Smolka?
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 18925, motion, please.
Make a motion to, go ahead, Anthony.
You can have
Make
your
a
next
motion to
vote.
award the contract for the audio and visual equipment and installation bid 19-004 to VSA Inc., Buffalo Grove, Illinois, in the amount of $35,457 to include hardware installation and training. This award is based on quality of products and lowest vendor meeting specifications.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Wong.
Aye.
Andreino.
Aye.
Porter.
Aye.
Kane.
Aye.
Khan.
Aye.
Smolka.
Aye.
Shupai.
Aye. Motion carries. Item 18926, motion, please. Mike?
I make a motion to approve administration's recommendation for the release of the closed session minutes as presented. The following closed session minutes will be approved for release: November 4th, 2017, of special meeting; November 8th, 2017, a special meeting; October 11th, 2017, the regular meeting; September 13th, 2017, regular meeting; and the December 12th, 2017, special meeting.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Andreino.
Aye.
Porter.
Aye.
Kane.
Aye.
Khan.
Aye.
Smolka.
Aye.
Shupai.
Aye.
Wong.
Aye.
Motion carries. Would anyone like to remove anything from the consent calendar? May I have a motion to approve, please?
I make a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second?
Second.
Roll call?
Porter.
Aye.
Kane.
Aye.
Khan.
Aye.
Smolka.
Aye.
Shupai.
Aye.
Wong.
Aye.
Andreino.
Aye.
Motion carries. Dr. Thompson, correspondence.
There were 2 requests and responses during the period of the last month. On August 6, 2018, a request was received from Robert Leahy Jr. The response to this request was sent on August 13th. On August 7th, 2018, a request was received from Katie Smizer, NBC 5. The extension letter to respond to this request by 5 additional business days was sent on August 14th, and then the response was sent on August 21st.
All right, may I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion adjourned.
Second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting